told you that you were something special and new.
What's happening, everybody? Scarbage81 here, reviewing my 2012 Honda Interstate 1300. This is a super cool bike. I love this bike. Huge fan of this thing. It's a 1300cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine, shaft-driven, 5-speed, comes standard with a hill toe shifter and floorboards and drag bars and bags and a windshield, which is awesome on a brisk day like today in December in Nashville, Tennessee, when it is roughly upper 50s. This is a super fun bike to ride. Because of your floorboards, it's not going to corner that great, and the wheelbase is kind of like 72, 73 inches, give or take an inch or two, but it's not going to corner that great, but it's not made for that. This is like a chopper and a cruiser had a kid, and this is the bike that was born. Big fat front tire, huge swooping fenders, long elongated tank. The lines on this thing are so good looking. This bike is just insanely cool. Cool factor oozing out of the pipes, and I'll get to that in just a second. This bike has a 4.5 gallon tank, which should get you, if you're riding conservatively, you should average about 40 to 45 miles per gallon. It's got very simple controls, this bike. Your left hand control module has a low and high beam, a signal indicator, which cancels by just pushing the button inward, and a horn, which one of the gripes I have about this bike, the horn's kind of dinky for what the bike is. That being said, I can't complain that much about it. It's a bike. The right hand control module has a kill switch and a start button. Again, super simple controls. There's no bells and whistles on this bike. It's just a simple V-twin engine, 1300cc. It's more than enough power to get you down the road. I'm not sure if I had mentioned earlier, but this is a shaft-driven bike, so you have no chain to maintain or belt. Again, this bike, out of the 3 models that were released by Honda, this being one of them, this bike has hard saddle bags and a windshield, which again comes in super handy along with the floorboards. I'm a huge fan of floorboards, even though it doesn't aid to the cornering that well. I'll take it. Super cool. It's got fuel injection too, so you don't have to worry about winterizing this bike. Maybe add some fuel treatment if you're going to leave it sitting for a while, but other than that, it's got the EFI fuel injection, so you don't have to worry about any carbs or anything like that. Or running non-ethanol gasoline, because those of you that know engines, you know all about that. That's another video. But again, it's a super reliable bike. This bike just sat for over a month without the battery in it. Didn't run at all. I parked it after the riding season when it got kind of chilly and the weather got crappy, and it's been crappy for well over a month. And we had a holiday mixed in, so I was out of town for a week as well. But yeah, this bike sat for over a month without even turning over. I put the battery back in it, hooked the tuner and everything back up to it, and it cranked like it was just fired up yesterday. This thing is super reliable. These motors are borderline bulletproof. As long as you maintain them, change the oil when you're supposed to, this thing will run forever. And it's got more than enough power to ride double. You've got the factory seat that comes on this particular model is a 2-up seat. It's got passenger pegs. The only thing that you probably might want to add if you're going to be riding double a lot is probably a backrest for your passenger, because that could probably be an issue if you're riding for long periods of time without a backrest and a passenger. It's probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but then the rear monoshock adds to the comfortability of the bike. It handles potholes quite well, and the huge fat tires on this thing, it soaks up every crack and bump in the road. The wheelbase is, I think, roughly 72, 73 inches, so it's not going to corner that great, especially with the floorboards, but if you're buying this bike, you're not worried about cornering. There are 3 bikes in this particular lineup that Honda released. This one being the Honda Interstate. The sister bike to this one is the State Line. It's just the naked version. It doesn't have the bags of the windshield. It's every bit the same bike, same frame and everything, as far as I know. Then there's the 3rd model called the Honda Fury, which is the bad girl of the group. The Honda Fury is a super sexy machine, just a super cool bike. I think the frame is a little different, but other than that, the frame and the handlebars, I think, are the only 2 differences. I think the front wheel is a little thinner. I think it uses a thinner front tire, and the forks are a little bit different. But other than that, it's the same motor. A lot of features on the bikes are the same across all 3 models. Again, they're all 1300cc V-twin, 2 spark plugs per cylinder. It's a liquid-cooled V-twin, roughly 80 cubic inches, and it's shaft-driven. So yeah, you don't have to. The only maintenance you should really ever have to do is change your oil when you're supposed to. Other than that, I mean, these are pretty solid bikes for what you're getting, and you should be able to get into them for roughly $5,000 or less, depending on the year, make, and model. So let's get into the gripes that I have about the bike. One of the gripes I have is, well, there's no fuel gauge, which is kind of a non-issue with me, because on the dash, it has a low fuel indicator, which I think, if I'm correct, it comes on when you've got that last half gallon of the 4.5 gallons. So when you get down that low, you might want to find some fuel when that light pops on. Otherwise, you're going to be pushing the 700+ pound beauty up the road to the nearest pump. Another gripe I have is this one's a bit of a. It's not the biggest issue, but it's something I did not know until I went to a couple of Honda forums. I was out riding one afternoon in the summer, and the bike was super hot, and I actually wound up stalling it. And yeah, it was total rider error. I thought I was in first. Turns out I was in second, and because the motor was so hot, this particular engine is known for piston ring expansion when the motor gets super hot. Which means if you do not have a battery that has a high cold cranking amperage output, it's gonna not want to turn the bike over. But all you really have to do in that instance is just hit the start button a few times, and it should eventually just kick right on over and get you back on the road. That's the major issue, which is not really that big of an issue. Again, I went out and spent like $300 on a really good battery for this thing. And yeah, that solved the issue. Even in hot weather, when the motor is super hot, a good high cranking battery, high output cranking battery will turn the motor over just fine, get you back on the road where you need to be going. One of the other gripes that I find about this bike is, and this only comes after you've been riding for a minute. The bike is more than capable of doing interstate speeds. I can only assume that's why they dubbed it the Interstate, because this thing, you could ride this thing to Mars and back, as far as I'm concerned. However, at 75, 80 plus miles an hour, you do kind of find yourself reaching for a 6th gear that's not quite there. And I'm not the only one to say this. I'm sure there are plenty of other Honda owners out there that would agree that this bike definitely could use the 6th gear. However, it's not completely wound out and you got plenty of gear left at 80 miles an hour. This bike is more than capable of passing at 80 miles an hour. But you just kind of, you kind of find yourself searching for that 6th gear. It's something that you have to get used to. I don't really look for that 6th gear when I'm on the interstate anymore. You just get used to it after a second. Just know that the bike is not wound out completely, and it's got plenty of top end left to go. Super cool cruiser, this thing. It's more than reliable. Change your oil like you should. This thing will last a long, long time. There's no joke. Hondas can run for a very, very long time, and a lot of them have super high miles. This one I actually got from a dealership in Chattanooga. I had a little over 17,000 miles on it when I bought it. Rode it home to Nashville, and been riding it since. And it's been a busy year, so I haven't been able to ride like I wanted to. And I've only put about 2,000 miles on the bike, but it's got plenty of life left in it. Even though it's 10 years old, this bike has more than enough pep to get up and go, especially since the previous owner had installed the Cobra pipes on it and added a tuner, so the throttle response is super quick on this bike. And that just about does it. This is I hope this is about all I have for this bike as far as my review goes. I've owned a ton of Honda bikes over the years, and this one is by far my favorite. Again, every bike's going to have a quirk or two that you will figure out the longer you own the bike and the more you ride it. But I hope this video was very helpful to anybody thinking about purchasing an Interstate or a State Line or a Fury. They are very reliable bikes and definitely worth looking at if you're in the market. So on that note, feel free to click that like button and hit the little subscription bell, and that way you get a notification every time a new video drops. Again, this is Scarbage81 signing off. Thank you guys for watching my video, and I will see you in the next one. In the right place, forever losing time and space till I'd given up. Always seem to settle for the wrong thing, and drowning with the fog would bring trying to rise above. The crest of road waves encompassing me, give myself room to breathe. I was thinking that fate would get the best of me, but I guess I'll save that date with destiny. Rediscovering faith, can't say I don't believe, but now I'm feeling that wave come crashing over me. Good time is mine, in the effort lost to the excuses.